Tees. Sharon, do you want to, are we able to share a presentation?
Oh, you should be able to.
Okay, Sharon, do you want to share and or do you want me to bring up the presentation?
Actually, if you can bring it up, because I think you made some changes after the one that I saved, so you have the most recent.
Okie dokie. Bear with us here, folks. I am slow with technology.
No worries.
Although I don't seem to have a share screen option. Is it possible that maybe you need to make me a host or something like that?
No, let me see here.
Oh, there we go. Maybe that was me. There we go. All right, can everybody see that?
Yep.
Okie dokie. So welcome everybody. Thank you for having us. We are going to try to keep this presentation relatively short. This is our first time presenting on 2 Shawshene Road. I'm with the East Boston CDC. I'm also joined tonight by our Executive Director, Al Caldarelli. And as many of you may know, but just in case there's anyone on the call who isn't as familiar with the CDC, we have a 50-year track record in East Boston. We've developed countless projects and consider ourselves a part of this community, not just in terms of our housing work, but also the economic development work we've done. We've done small lending to businesses in East Boston. We've also partnered with a number of local organizations to help foster a nonprofit network in East Boston. We've co-developed with Zoomix and with the East Boston Neighborhood Health Center, with EBEC, and we're very proud of our track record in East Boston. What we're presenting tonight is going to be purely residential. We don't have any commercial space planned for the development. And what this is going to be, what we're proposing is mixed income housing, but it is subsidized with various sources from the city and the state. So we'll get into a little bit more of what the affordability is of the project that we're proposing at 2 Shawshene Road. But we are primarily, our mission is to create affordable housing opportunities in East Boston. And what we're proposing here is family housing. These are some images of some projects that you might, some buildings you might be familiar with around East Boston. You have the Chevres School, that's senior housing. You have the Barnes School, that's also senior housing, where we've partnered with the health center and now the social centers. You've got the Lyman School, which is over on Gove Street, and Lewis Mall. So we do have a strong track record of providing senior housing in East Boston. What we're in recent history, what we have been focused on is family housing. When the CDC began developing affordable housing, the strongest need in East Boston was senior housing. Our seniors were living in triple deckers. There were no elevators. They weren't handicap accessible. So we focused on senior housing. And we really didn't need affordable family housing in East Boston. Our triple deckers were affordable family housing. We've seen in the last 10 years that the price of those triple deckers, both to buy and to rent, has really escalated, putting East Boston out of reach for many of our working families. So I'll go through the first couple of slides before turning it over to Sharon. A little bit of the site context. I'm sure folks on this call are familiar with it, but it always helps to have a visual. So our address is 2 Shawshene Road, but it's a little confusing because we're actually off of a Shawshene Road extension. So it's really at the end of Barnes Avenue, there's a dead end. and it dead ends at our site. It's about a 30,000 square foot site surrounded primarily by commercial to the right. And then across the street on the left is residential. So we're sort of bookending the residential neighborhood as it transitions into a more commercial neighborhood with the CVS and some other commercial properties. So this is a view going down Saratoga Street. You have here the law offices, the Boncori law offices, and a few other small businesses in here. This right here is the Shawsheen Road extension. So Shawsheen to the left, as you can see, is a public road. To the right is a public road. To the left is Shawsheen Road extension, a private way. That's just another site. So our site is behind this off of Saratoga Street. So there's no real access to our site from Saratoga Street. We're actually sort of hemmed in by the Domino's and the wine store and the law offices in the front. This is a little further down. This is the CVS and the CVS parking lot. In the back left of the CVS parking lot is what abuts our site. And then here's a little bit of the residential context. So Barnes Avenue, it's a pretty quiet 1 and 2 family street. There are some 3 families a little further up. It's got some beautiful trees. Part of what we want to talk to you guys about is our landscape design is very preliminary. Our site design in that respect is very preliminary. And so we're excited to have a site that allows for some open space and some good landscaping. And this is really sort of the dead end of Barnes Avenue. And what you're looking at is where the private way of Shawsheen Road. It's actually a little bit wooded there. There's a little path that people take to walk through from Barnes Avenue, maybe out to Saratoga Street. We have one of our abutters, parks their car. And so it's a little wooded there. It's not a finished road. Shawsheen Road picks up again right here. It's an entrance to the MBTA, the Orient Heights station. And then our site is just behind those trees. So our site itself is an industrial site. So currently they store oil tanks there. They're an oil distributor. Not the cleanest site in the world. We are doing environmental testing. There is some contamination on the site. So our goal really is to clean up the site and landscape it and make it a better neighbor. And this is, I think, just to give a little bit of context in terms of the size. So it's nearly an acre, not quite. We're proposing an FAR of under 2 for the site. And like I said, I think we are excited to have the opportunity to look at to have a sizable site in East Boston, right? These are rare. They don't come along every day, in order to do some good site design and some landscaping and open space. So we're proposing, I think there might have been, I think it might have said 63 units on the email that went out describing this, but we're actually proposing 58 units. It is mixed income in terms of the income targets that we're targeting for the proposal, but we're right next to the Orient Heights MBTA station. So looking to capitalize on some transit oriented opportunities, but also knowing that those connectivity to the train stations and to transit is really important for our families as well, in terms of offering employment opportunities. So what we're proposing is actually 2 buildings. One is a homeownership building. It would be condominiums, 22 condominiums, 12 2-bedrooms and 10 3-bedrooms, and a 36 unit rental building with 8 1-bedrooms, 18 2-bedrooms, and 10 3-bedrooms. So our focus in family housing is really in those 2 and 3-bedroom units. We are proposing 19 parking spaces. We're proposing them as structured parking. So there's a little bit of grade to the site that Sharon will get into that allows us to provide parking. And the project itself is, we're very, again, I'm couching all of this as we're very preliminary, but our goal is for the homeownership opportunities to meet the state's targets and the city's targets of providing homeownership opportunities for families who earn up to 80% AMI and up to 100% AMI. So for folks who don't, think about AMI every day, for a family of 4, that would be 96,000, earning up to 96,000 for a family of 4 and up to 120,000 for the 100% AMI. So what that really means is that we're able to attract subsidies so that we can build these so that they are well built and well constructed. But when we go to sell them, we can afford to sell them in the 2 and mid 2s, low 3s, as opposed to what market rate units for 2 and 3 bedroom condos in East Boston are selling for. The rental opportunities will be targeted to families who earn between 30 and up to 60% AMI. Again, that ranges from 36,000 for a family of 4, all the way up to 72,000 for a family of 4. So easily, right? Even in our rental housing, that's 2 working parents or a single parent. So our tenants are working families. And I'm going to turn it over to Sharon to talk a little bit about our design principles.
Thanks, Tanya. Yeah, so as Tanya mentioned, we felt like open space was very important on this site because it is close to marsh, because it is close to a residential neighborhood. We're making sure that a portion of the site is devoted to open space, both programmed, like for example, a tot lot, or other uses just in sort of general some green space. You can see the next slide.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I'm so sorry. I'm sitting here going, when is she going to move to the next slide? There you go, Sharon.
No worries. And then the next principle was the stepped massing. And so what you'll see is that while the building is 3 to 4 stories, what we're doing is we're putting the 3-story part of the building closest to the residential neighborhood and putting the 4 stories of the building next to the CVS. Really trying to stay as close as possible to the scale of the surrounding buildings. The building on the left is the condo building. That's so close to the MBTA yard. That's where we would have the parking at grade. That is in the flood zone there. And so we would be lifting that first floor up and putting parking down on the lower level. And then, just with the design concept, we really want to make this building not feel like a giant building, or these 2 buildings not feel like giant buildings. So trying to break up the materials a little bit, having things like cornices and bay windows so that they feel residential in their design. And these images are all extremely preliminary, but just meant to give you a sense of the ways that the buildings would read sitting on the lot. And then, it's really important for us to be building for the 21st century. So building to lead possibly passive house standards, which would mean extremely efficient building envelopes, high efficiency mechanical systems and water saving devices. And then the site design would be there to restore and enhance the landscape. So right next to Belle Isle Marsh, we have a completely paved site with lots of trucks and industrial uses. We want to restore that so that it becomes a more natural part of the landscape. So native plantings, putting all the parking underneath the building so that you don't have large areas that are paved, you have open spaces, and doing stormwater infiltration and wetland mitigation and management. This is the site plan. So it shows the homeowner building in blue up at the top of the site. That's adjacent to the MBTA yard there. And then the orange building is the rental building. And the parking is only under the homeowner building, essentially because to put it underneath the rental building would really increase the height of that building. That's the highest part of the site. So we tried to keep that as low as possible. Put the parking down on the lower end of the site.
And I think this also highlights just the two places where we focused on open space. There's, as you saw in the renderings, there's also a lot of green and open space elsewhere on the site, but we did leave two corridors open, one to the back of the site along the MBTA yard, and then one through the middle of the site, kind of aligning with Barnes Avenue. This was trying to be cognizant of the fact that there's a proposal from the East Boston Greenway to try to extend the bike path, a protected bike path, past Constitution Beach and up through Winthrop. So we're trying to leave space and to leave room for a future bike path accommodation. That's why you see those strips where they're shown.
Here's the preliminary landscape plan. As Tanya mentioned, most of the site would be green in some way, whether it's a lawn or a tot lot or a simulated wetland or a bike path. And then the buildings on the right-hand side there, closest to the CVS, are 4 to 4.5 stories, the half story being that parking. And then closer to the residential side of the neighborhood, the buildings are 3 and 3.5 stories. So here's just a bird's eye view, giving you again a sense of the size of the buildings and the way that they're stepping down, and the way that they're also broken up into different masses. These are the floor plans. So the 2 and 3 bedrooms units you can see are green and blue. So we're really emphasizing those larger family-sized units. And then the orange are the 1-bedroom units. And that's everything for our presentation. Time for questions.
Yeah, I think I do really want to emphasize that we're here as a just to open the conversation with the neighborhood. I know that you guys see a lot of projects and probably have a lot of good thoughts. So we're anxious to hear from you.
I have a few questions. I am at 119 Barnes Ave, and I'm new to Barnes Ave. So I'm not familiar with anything that may have been discussed about using this property far before. So I may have some questions that seem redundant, but bear with me. Would the access to this property be from Shawsheen, i.e. Saratoga, or would you be breaking into Barnes Ave? It does not look like you're breaking into Barnes Ave to provide access for this. Is that correct?
So what we're proposing is a curb cut past Barnes Avenue. So it's a curb cut off of Shawsheen Road. So instead of trying to eliminate or pave a section of the private way where Shawsheen Road is private, we're using the public way before you get to the MBTA entrance. They have a gate there.
Mm-hmm.
So cars would
defensible.
have to travel down Barnes Avenue, and then the curb cut is off of Shawsheen Road.
And would that be the only access to the project?
Yes, that's the only access we're proposing right now.
That's totally unacceptable, as far as I'm concerned, as an abutter. Besides the fact that the project is way too large for that area to have 3 and 4 stories next to houses that are single family. I mean, the 2 properties that abut, I believe, are single family houses. I could be wrong, but I believe they're both single families. And even if they're 2 family houses, you're proposing 3 and 4 stories right next to them. You're proposing that 48 families come in and out of a narrow dead-end street. And then you're only proposing 19 parking spaces with no parking for a 36-unit rental property. So where do you think those 36 rental units are going to park? They're going to try to park on Barnes Ave, which has limited parking already. I mean, the owners, the people that live there, take up every parking space. So where are those 36 units going to park? that's a concern also. So concerned about the traffic with Barnes Ave now becoming, I'm going to call it a cut through, not really a cut through, but of sorts, with the volume of traffic coming in and out of Barnes Avenue. There are families on that street with children. Where are the 36 units of families going to live? I mean, park? They may be rental properties, they may be low income, but I'm sure they have at least one or two cars. If they're two parent households, they have two cars. So you're talking about potentially 60 or 70 cars having no place to park. Where are they going to park?
Some good points. So thank you for raising those. And I hear you. I think the 19 parking spaces probably sounds low. So I think we are looking for feedback on the parking. As you guys may or may not know, the city is trying to implement parking maximums for projects, but we're not hitting that maximum here. The only thing I would ask people to bear in mind in this particular instance is the CDC does own and manage other affordable family housing in the neighborhood. And what we do find is that some of our households have one car. We very rarely have 2-car households. But then probably somewhere between 10 to 30% of our households actually do not own vehicles. The lower AMI income households typically are relying on bus and train transit.
Oh my God.
So I just
Okay,
want to
I mean,
point that
that's
out, that
fine.
we're not, that I understand there's a big difference between
Yeah.
58 and 19.
Yeah.
And there's definite room there,
Right,
but
and we're not talking about the 22 home ownership units, which they are lower income, but they're not as low income.
Yep.
So you have 22 home ownership units and you're only providing them with 19 parking spaces. So even if each of them has only one car, there's still 3 units that have no parking space.
Yeah.
And there may be units in there that there are 2 cars. So where are they going to park?
So
And where are the
yeah.
guests going to park? They're going to have guests. Where are the guests going to park?
Okay.
So Tanya, could I just jump in for
Yeah,
a
of
moment?
course.
Hi.
Sure.
Thank you for the comments. So again, Jeff Drago, we're zoning attorneys in Boston. We represent the CDC on a number of projects. So just a couple points. So one thing, as Tanya had mentioned, this is preliminary. As part of our process, and I know you may be new at some of the zoning terms, and I'm going to answer some of your questions because you brought up some good points.
Well, I
One
work
is
for
this-
Boston, I work in the real estate department at a Boston law firm, so I'm not completely
Okay,
naive in the
I'm sorry, I know you said
terminology,
you were
but
new to the area. and asked
new
about
to
the
this
zone.
project,
Let-
yeah. new to
So,
this
so
project.
one of the points, this is going to be going through the Article 80 large project review process. And what that really is, and I don't know if you're familiar with that, that means this is going to have a heightened community process and a heightened design review set by the Boston Planning Department and so the Planning Board. So this is, again, just a preliminary meeting. We are going to have to provide a transportation study of the general area as part of our filing with them. They call it a project notification form. And as part of that, because of the size and scope of the project, we're going to file it. And that transportation study is going to look at things like parking count for the area, bike parking requirements that this building is going to have, encouraging new ways of transportation. For instance, there's now something that the city is promoting that you can restrict resident parking. So you can basically have the tenants of a building or the owners of a building not be allowed to have resident stickers based on this particular building. So even though other people in the area could have it, the city, in looking at concerns from residents about utilizing city on-street parking, they can restrict the building. And that's something we can look at as well, along with our transportation study. The other point you mentioned was the size of the buildings and the scopes of the buildings. So I know you mentioned some past projects. So there's been a few proposals that have come down to try to develop this property. This is the old August Brothers oil site. It's been an eyesore for a number of years, but it does fall in an economic development area. So that's an EDA area. In that particular area, there's certain allowable uses. So industrial, commercial, that's why the August Brothers used this site for so long. With that use comes things like truck traffic, deliveries, and I'm just being completely honest.
Yes,
So
yeah.
we felt in a residential development like this, putting the massing sort of away from the 4-story, away from the residential corridor on the commercial side, leaving 3 stories, which is allowable under an EDA area. So we have very few violations that are going to be triggered just because of this particular location. And this isn't something that we set. This is something that has been set under the zoning code by the BPDA for years. We felt this use, and this is a large site. So even if the CDC wasn't even purchasing this building, say somebody else was, say a commercial developer, even as of right under the code, you could build 35 feet. You only are required to have a 20-foot setback. There's minimal open space requirement in any, and the FAR for the area is 2.0. So we're actually below what's even allowable. And that, just to know that when we looked at this, we put a lot of thought into not only what's around us, but also having things like open space, green space for the residents, a beautiful landscape plan with which, as this develops, a landscape architect will come on board. So just a couple of points to answer some of your question. I'm sorry to jump in.
That's okay,
No,
that's fine.
that's
Can I ask you another question? I'll actually tell you something. I was out for a walk this afternoon and I crossed Saratoga and started down Shawshene Street. And there was a man walking down the middle of Shawshene and he said to me, "Hey, can you tell me where 2 Shawshene is?" And I looked at him, I said, "Yeah, why?" He said, "I'm with the Boston Water and Sewer Department and I have to check on the water." He says, "And I can't figure out for the life of me where it is or how to get to it." Which brought to mind a very important thing. Emergency services, police, ambulance, fire. When you hear Shawshene, they're going to be looking at Shawshene between Baywater and Saratoga. They're not going to know that you go into to Shawshene by way of either all the way Bonds or St. Edward to Bonds. It would make more sense if you're trying to get into Shawshene to go in Shawshene from Shawshene.
So yeah, so we're not going to block that off. So Shawshene Road is a private way. We can't, we don't have the rights to stop Shawshene Road. It is what it is now. It's a private way. Everyone owns the middle of the street that has to remain open for passage. That's not something we can.
There's no access though.
But I'm just saying, so if the residents of Shawshene Road wanted to just keep it open or pave it, you have the rights to the middle of the road in a private way. So
Right.
if a fire truck felt like it was an emergency and needed to use other ways to get to the building or anywhere in that area, they have the right to traverse as long as they can fit down
Right.
Shawshene Road.
But you're missing my point. My point is that when time is of the essence to get there, and
Yeah.
they don't know how to get to Shawshene. They don't know that Shawshene has to be gotten to by way of Bonds Ave.
Well, I mean, that's like saying when August Brothers was operating there, if there was God forbid, if there was a fire at August Brothers, they would have an address of Shawshene Road. The fire department would have to get to that access point. It's not
What's
that this.
their address?
So it's Shawshene Road. It's 2 Shawshene Road or 4 Shawshene Road. And again, Boston Inspectional Services controls the addresses. So this is a proposed address, but they can change that address to another address if they felt it was more appropriate to 4 Shawshene 3, whatever that is, whatever you're facing, they can change that. Once it's in the database, that's then made aware. That's in the city system for emergency personnel, ambulance personnel. So once they know there's a new development, that goes throughout all the city systems at that point.
Right, but you're missing my point. Why are you going by a convoluted way of Bonds Ave rather than continuing right down Shawshene and leaving it be Shawshene and having the access that way, rather than having it go down Barnes Ave?
So I think a couple of things, because we did look at this, right? And I guess the issue is you really couldn't have 2-way traffic, correct me if I'm wrong, Sharon, coming down the Shawshene Road, the private way. So we only have the rights to improve or change Shawshene Road, the private way, in that lightly shaded area. So in the, where it's shown as a little bit shaded here, I don't know if you can see my cursor. That's the only part of the Shawshene Road extension private way that we could improve or change. Now, we thought it would be better and more preferable to the neighborhood if we did not pave that. And did not have that as part of our site access or a one-way, exit or a one-way entrance. It's also, in our opinion, a little dangerous for people to be exiting out of our building onto Shawshene Road that way. But we could pave that, right? Like if everybody says, no, we really actually don't like that walking path, it's dangerous, it's poorly lit, we would prefer that you pave it, put in a sidewalk, make it safer, and let one-way traffic go there. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, I think we could do that, right?
Well, we could do it to a certain area, but so if anyone else owns along the other side, you sort of have built rights to the street. So what we couldn't do is start putting, real upgrades, because then you need approval from everyone on both sides. But if you were going to pave it and say we could have some throughway, that I'm sure that everyone would be fine with that. We couldn't start putting drainage systems in, and even sidewalks are questionable. In front of our side, we probably could, but we just couldn't really touch the structure of the street because it is a private way. If you look at places like Swan Ave, if you're familiar with that, that's a private way. Geneva Street, those streets are all in pretty rough condition. And the reason being is that the city doesn't maintain them. They can only plow them and keep it basically free from traffic, because you have to allow passageway. But other than that, there's really no upgrades on private way. We felt obviously that coming through Barnes Ave, one is safer, a bigger street, safer street. And more
I have a
accessible.
question on and just to introduce myself, my name is Derek Dolan, and my wife and I actually recently moved to Barnes Avenue as well. So close there. We're on 95 Barnes Avenue, so a little bit further down the street. But I guess one thing I share in my neighbors' concerns about, one thing that attracted my wife and I here is that it's a nice residential street, has the dead end feel. It's very quiet. We want to have a family here someday. So the concerns of all the traffic coming through just Barnes Avenue is not appealing to me, although I respect the appeal for workforce housing and more affordable housing. But my question is there currently any access from the CVS parking lot side, or is there any options to do anything along that? Because I guess my interpretation of that plot, if I understand where it is, I always thought that the access currently was from that CVS area. Is that not the case, or is there a way to expand parking or have some sort of car access from that side? Because it does seem like all of the parking is going to be on Barnes Avenue in that very condensed section there too, if this is the plan that goes forward.
Yeah, it's a great question. And we did reach out because it did seem like a very natural place to put an entrance. It's at the lower part of our site. And so you could almost see, at the back of that green area, if that was the entrance. Unfortunately, that's all private. So there is no access now. And no one was receptive to sort of, providing a permanent access into our site from a private site. So we really have to rely on the public streets or the portion of the private way that we can try to utilize.
If I could jump in, my name is Attorney Michael Magar. I represent Bula Real Estate Holdings that owns 1144 Saratoga Street. And also that operates the Belle Isle Liquor Store. This may be a question more for Attorney Drago. I don't know if you're familiar, but if you're facing my client's building from Saratoga Street, on the right-hand side, there's a driveway up there, which is actually an easement. So one of the things we're curious about, and given the comments so far tonight, that Shawshene is the only access, one of the things that we'd be interested in is we would be looking to terminate that easement that runs to the right of my client's building. Again, as you're facing my client's building from Saratoga.
Sure. Yeah. So actually, I know, Tanner, if you can pull that up, because we actually looked at that easement. At some point, someone put angled parking along that easement, making it pretty tight to get by. So we didn't, just as an all, that would be, it would be tough the way it's set up right now, but we'd be happy to, I don't know if we can pull up that picture, Tanya, or the front.
It's actually showing, you can leave that one up. It's actually showing at the bottom of 21. So
yeah, I was just hoping to pull up where the angle.
You're talking about right here?
If we could pull up the picture, I'll just, sorry.
That's okay. Sorry, let me see if I can find it. It's probably towards the beginning in the
Yeah.
site position.
So just because I know exactly right. So no, the dominoes, I think that's the best one we're gonna get. But so if you're talking about that side easement from
Right.
from the property, correct? But I
Correct,
believe
yes.
they're parking over there right now. So, but yeah, we'd be happy to talk to you more in person about that and just see how that's functioning right now.
well, I mean, based on the plans that you have right now, and I don't think that, and your layout, and I understand why you're doing it, and obviously the decision's been made to come off of Shawshene, and I think you're pretty much glued to that, especially because given where the rental building is situated, the rental building basically butts right up against the easement anyway, so it's basically not usable. And which would lead me into my second question, which was, is there some plan to put up some kind of fencing at the bottom of that? If you go back to page 18 or page 21 at the bottom where the rental building abuts my client's property, is there some plan to put up some fencing or something along here so there's not pedestrian traffic? Are people walking through my client's lot?
We can think about that. We haven't gotten that far along, but it's certainly something we hear you.
If that's a concern, and we always, again, during our landscape screening and buffering, would be happy to work with your client on something that's appropriate.
Okay, and then our last, really, my client's last concern right now is in terms of construction vehicle access, which I believe it might have been mentioned, but I assume construction vehicle access is going to be also off of the Shawshene curb cut as opposed to using the easement to get on and off the property.
We haven't gotten that far along. We will have to obviously have a construction management plan that spells out all of that in careful detail for the neighborhood. So I think we'd probably want to table that discussion until we figure out whether anything could be worked out, quite frankly, even with the MBTA for access through their parking lot to get to the site before we make any promises about where construction vehicles would be entering or exiting.
So basically then what I'm seeing here and what I've heard so far, my client would be supportive of the project. And primarily, my client's primary concern, as I said, is terminating that easement because obviously, based on this layout, the easement has absolutely no use whatsoever. So with those things in mind, thank you.
I can, sorry, Michael, I can put my office number in the chat if that works for you, or privately send it to you just so we could talk further.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
I'll give it to you right now. It's 781
Okay.
453-0800.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tanya, who would be responsible for the ongoing landscaping after the building is built? Is just to make sure it's maintained, and is there like an HOA, or how does that operate?
Yeah, that's a great question. So most likely we would have an underlying, we wouldn't subdivide the site between the home ownership and the rental. So we would have basically a master development so that the lands, and for exactly that reason, for landscaping and for site logistics, so that we don't have to enter into easements between, for site access, easements between the two buildings. So there would probably be one entity that both the homeownership and the rental building are a part of that controls the whole entire site and the landscaping. And just so you know, East Boston CDC, we actually self-manage our buildings. So Metro Management is a division of East Boston CDC. So as you'll see, like up at our sites, you know, at the Chevrolet School, where we have a lot of open space and we have a community garden. We do all of our own grounds maintenance. We use our own maintenance team. We do our own snow removal. We have maintenance technicians who live in the neighborhood, who are on call on the weekends. We do a lot of our own landscaping. I'd have to look into whether or not we ever have a third party who does landscaping maintenance. It's really mostly our own crews because we're local and we're at the site. You know, we drive by our sites every day. So is there a particular concern or anything in particular you'd like to see?
No,
as
just
part
was
of the site
curious,
plan?
you know, who would be responsible for maintaining it on an ongoing basis. And if I am familiar with your project, one of the buildings you showed in Eagle Hill. I used to live in Eagle Hill prior to Barnes Avenue. And I know that's a really nice building. Just one question on the pathways here. Is there a way to get to the CVS? I know this is preliminary, but is there a way to get to the CVS from the buildings here?
So I think really there probably is right now, the way that it's shown. I think you could probably walk through, but there's a fence along the back of our site. And I have to be totally honest, I'm not entirely sure whether the CVS owns that fence or whether the August Brothers owns that fence right now. So I think one of the things that we probably don't want this to turn into is like a cut through for people who are trying to get to CVS or people who are at CVS and who want to like park and access the neighborhood or the T station. So
Yeah,
I
that's a good
think
point.
we maybe do need to think about, you know, some fencing. Or one other thing that somebody else brought up to us was like, you know, the view for our residents looking to that side of the site to the CVS is not the prettiest. So maybe we should consider some larger trees on that side of the site to sort of create more of a buffer. Right now, the neighborhood is looking at some really nice trees. They're not looking at the CVS parking lot. So our goal is not to sort of open it up and create a view corridor to the CVS parking lot. We want to still have it feel like you're looking at trees and landscaping.
Okay.
Just
Thank
a
you.
couple of points.
Tanya,
if
I do
could.
think, oh, sorry, I
Go ahead, Sharon.
did put a question in the chat, I think, about pedestrian access along the right of way on Shawshene to Saratoga Street. And I think the intention is to keep that. So pedestrians would be able to go from Barnes Ave along that Shawshene extension and get to Saratoga Street that way.
That's not very accessible right now. I
No, it's not
personally
right
would
now.
not. And I think that just in a personal position, I would like it to not be accessible so that it's not become a cut through. I live on a dead end because I want it to be a dead end. I don't want it to be a cut through to CVS, to Saratoga, to a dozen and one other things. So I would like it to be such that you cannot get to anything from Barnes Ave or this proposed project, be it CVS, the liquor store, or the Domino's Pizza, because I don't want it to become a cut through so that we don't have kids or whoever, as you say, parking or cutting through or whatever. The other thing, I don't know whether you're aware of it or not, but there's a proposed development before the Board of Appeals to go in on Shawshene Extension as 70 Shawshene. And being one of the abutters to that, we're not happy with some of the things they're proposing. So there's a proposed 5 condominium unit dwelling going in kind of across from the law offices that's being proposed. So that's even going to congest the area more. So we're kind of those of us that are right on the side of Barnes Ave that is on the Saratoga Street side are being bombarded with development right now, with the 5 units going behind us and then this massive project going beside us. So what was a quiet, tree-lined, dead-end street when I moved into the area 7 months ago is now suddenly going to become this overdeveloped area, which is exactly what I didn't want when I bought my unit 7 months ago. So that is not pleasing to me.
I hear you. Yep. I know there's a lot going on in the neighborhood.
Yeah, there's too much going on. I mean, East Boston is becoming completely overdeveloped. And there's going to be a cost to it at some point. And that's why I'm not completely opposed to the project. I think that affordable housing is something that we need in East Boston because everything is so expensive. But I think the size and magnitude of the project is just too much for the area that it's in. And not only the area that it's in, but the way it gets accessed.
Can I ask a question? Because we didn't really talk through sort of like previous iterations of this that we thought through. And so, you know, at one point we tried to concentrate the development on, you know, the portion of the site that was closer to the commercial Shawshene Road. Unfortunately, concentrating the development in that area, and that was because we were proposing a lot more surface parking. And doing so, you know, made it so that it was a 4- and 5-story building, but we had more parking. We had more surface parking. Looking around the neighborhood, we figured that would just not be palatable, that the 5 stories was going to be too tall.
Yeah, for the neighborhood.
So that's how so then we flattened out the building, right? We went down to, I think it was almost all at 3 stories. Maybe there was a small portion that bumped up. But then it really covered, we had a lot coverage that it took up a huge amount of the lot. So just like you drive around and you see buildings that are like 90% lot coverage around East Boston. And when we looked at the renderings of that, there just wasn't enough green. And in this neighborhood, you felt like you really wanted more green. So we broke it into 2 separate buildings. And that's how we got to and that's how we ended up, you know, having to bump up a little bit above 3 stories. But one of the things that we are thinking about is trying to incorporate, sort of making it feel like a little bit more of a walkable site so that it doesn't just feel like 2 bulky multifamily buildings. But one of the things that Sharon's exploring is adding some direct entrances. There'd have to be some stairs, but having it just feel like it draws residents from a pedestrian scale into the site, going into, you know, front doors. We couldn't do that for all of the units, but that's something else that we're exploring to try to make the site feel a little bit more pedestrian scale, I guess is how
More like townhouses than apartment complexes.
Yeah, exactly. So again, we are open to creative ideas. I think, you know, we're not going to solve everything tonight, but we really appreciate the tenor of the conversation. Everyone has been honestly very about as supportive as anyone can be for a new large scale development that's popping up in their neighborhood. So I think we have a lot of good stuff to take back with us.
I mean, the biggest concern I have is after the project is said and done is the parking.
Yeah.
That's a major concern of mine. And I like the idea of, you know, certain projects not being able to park on the streets, but then it's enforcing it and getting someone to come down and enforce it.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, we're on the same street as the Orion Heights train station. I can't tell you how many times there are people that park here, and it's getting the transportation department to come down, and then they have to wait because it's more than 2 hours, and maybe they have to change the street to residents only instead of 2 hours parking. I don't know, but you know, when I come home from work, or when my daughter comes to visit me, or when my sister comes to visit me, I wanted to be able to park on my street, you know, or in front of my house, and not have to say, gee, there's no place to park because everybody in the apartment building on Shawshene is parked there. And that's, I mean, especially on the weekends, and that's a concern.
Yeah. Jeff, do you know, are we able to do like tandem parking or anything like that along the Shawshene Road extension, or is that not allowed on a private way?
Not on a private way. So in front of your portion that abuts your building, you technically can put cars there, but you can't block any public access from getting through. So you still there needs to be enough room to drive through. So they wouldn't be city spots. They would just be utilizing your own land, sort of at your own will, but you couldn't block anything in the middle of the street, or because the city still has to plow that street or be able to, God forbid, something, you can't just block it or an emergency vehicle. So, but I
It's
mean,
strange because
obviously,
there's clearly nobody plowing it now, but
yeah, but you
but
have,
if we did
yeah,
improve it or pave it in any way to
correct.
put parking, we'd have to leave enough drive space next to it.
Yeah, but I mean, that's a thought too. That's a good, if we were gonna pave it, I don't know how, but a lot of folks, I think, want to leave it the way it is so that it's not used. So I don't know, there's
Are
probably
you
mixed.
talking about Shawshene extension,
Yeah.
paving Shawshene
Yeah.
parking?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a touchy one.
yeah.
Is there
I
any
mean, we
way-
can,
Is there any way to access the project from like behind Barnes Avenue, where I believe the Lorraine Heights T-stop parking is / T-stop like storage facility?
Well, that's the only place. So you're saying where on this, like back here?
Yeah,
No, I don't think so.
because there's gonna be a lot of foot traffic on Barnes too. There's a lot of people in those units. So
Yeah. I mean, we hope actually that people will be walking, along Barnes and, and going to the train station and things like that. I think the pedestrian foot traffic, makes everybody feel safer. I can't see, again, our problem is private land
Yeah.
giving us public access. And so the MBTA and this commercial land here are not really viable access points.
I mean, obviously, as the project evolves, we're going to have a transportation consultant on board, to handle traffic studies, and just parking we know is an issue. So we can certainly look at that and other ways to promote other types of modes of transportation. So bike parking is going to be required on site. Maybe giving T-passes. I'm just throwing ideas out there, restricting residency permits, stuff like that. So these are all.
Yeah. Now you said you have a lot of the different buildings like the Bond School, which my father went to the Bond School, and the Chevrolet and whatnot. Those are all buildings that were existing that you then renovated to become, low income or senior housing. What other projects have you done that were ground up projects?
That's a great question. So the Greenway Apartments on Maverick Street, it's a 4-story new construction building on Maverick Street.
I'm trying to place it.
What's that?
I'm trying to place it.
Yeah, it's a little bit unassuming if you're on Maverick Street. It's a long, deep lot. And I think that's around 40 apartments, all family housing, 2 and 3 bedrooms. That was probably built about 7 or 9 years ago. And then we've also more recently built Paris Village, which is about 27 or maybe 32 apartments, family housing, 2 and 3 bedrooms. Again, a 4-story building with more of a Mansfield roof. And then we're currently under construction of the Grace Apartments in Maverick Square, which is a new construction ground up building. I think those might be the only 3 new construction ground up that we've done.
Okay. Question, you just mentioned it again, you said family housing. If you consider it family housing, why are you including 1-bedroom apartments? Those would not be what I would consider family.
Yeah, it's a great question. And we also struggle with this unit mix, right? So sometimes obviously we haven't done the 1-bedrooms, we've done the 2s and 3s. What we do see is that sometimes there's a demand for the 1-bedroom from our low income families, because even though our rents are as affordable as we can make them, right? Sometimes a single parent can't actually afford a 2-bedroom, even at that rent. So, so we do see that there is a demand for the 1-bedrooms. Whether or not, maybe we need to look at fewer 1-bedrooms in the rental building and more 2s and 3s. But that's why we include the 1s. Is there just, again, just on a gross dollar amount, they're a little bit
Right,
more
right.
affordable.
No, that's a good reason. Sort of like the Bertucci's coupon, $15 off of 30. A single person isn't going to spend $30. Why don't you give like $5 off of 20 or something like that? But they don't, they don't do that. They don't take that into consideration.
I have a couple of questions and points. If I'm off of mute finally.
Yeah, we can
Can
hear you.
everybody hear me?
We can hear you.
Hi, this is Rob Domenico. I'm at 118 Barnes Ave. One of the one of the points I wanted to address is as far as that could be, it's a commercial zoned area and this truck parking here now. It is far quieter and far less of a nuisance now with the buffer that we have on our dead end than what this project is proposing. The second thing is just, it's just questioning, I mean, you're changing the whole face of the neighborhood here with this project. As they were saying, it's a 1 and 2 family right up to St. Andrews on this end of the street. And it's very family oriented. A lot of kids play in the street, parking on both sides, just trying to get construction vehicles down here. It's going to be absolute nut house. Mentioned we're putting up with all there. We're already putting up with the airport flying right over the homes. You're asking us to put up with this. They want to put family, which you mentioned behind that empty space there, right off of Shawsheen. You're putting another unit I think it's been approved already for the corner of St. Andrews and Saratoga. And then we've got all those apartments that are being built right now on Bennington Street and Casket Place. Now that they're not coming back, that's going to be residential. I'm putting a proposal for that. So you're basically doing the whole scope of this neighborhood. Is there any thought as to the people that are here already, and why are we picking this spot here when there are, some of these other projects that did look great, but those were existing buildings that were already in the neighborhoods and they fit right in with the neighborhoods. These don't fit into this neighborhood right now as it is.
Well,
Yeah, I hear you. I think, although Al Caldarelli can probably speak a little bit better to the fact that when we were renovating a school building and putting in 60 apartments in one building, the neighborhood didn't necessarily feel that fit into the neighborhood at the time either. Fortunately, I think the buildings are much quieter and neighbors become neighbors, and over time they've become a core part of the East Boston neighborhood. I hear you. I know these are not single family homes. If we were, unfortunately, there are a lot of people in East Boston right now who cannot afford a single family home in East Boston. And so this is an opportunity. The East Boston CDC is still trying to expand our affordable and our middle income housing. And this lot is a larger lot. So I know it's a denser proposal. Again, like I said, I think when you ask, is there any consideration to the neighbors who live there now? I think I can tell you quite honestly, we really do want to make this a proposal that is as palatable as it can be to the existing neighbors. I mean, we do want you guys to feel like eventually you could welcome this site and these people as neighbors into your neighborhood, whether that's putting in a tot lot so that kids are playing together and kids are coming onto our site and it feels like an extension of some of the green space in the front yards that other people have to play in. It's not going to be single family homes, but we are trying to, in subtle ways, like Sharon described, have it echo some of what does make your part of East Boston such a nice place to live.
We did get some questions in advance, if you don't mind me asking them. One of them I think was covered a bit by your slides. This question is around the potential flooding of the project. What will be done to mitigate flooding as the project is in close proximity to the Belle Isle Marsh and Brook Bridge?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And this project, the first floor is going to be raised up on both buildings. The BPDA currently requires that projects of this size, that the first floor be put at the 70-year climate change projected flood level. So it ends up being about 19, elevation 19, which is about 3 feet higher than the current flood level. And everything at the first floor, even in that case, is going to be designed to be durable and withstand water. Everything below that level is going to be designed to let water come in and let water go out. So there won't be any mechanical equipment. There won't be any like drywall and soft surfaces that could harbor mold. It'll all be, the parking and the
A
landscape.
very fun Encore. We've been married for 15 years. And we
Sorry about that.
So yeah, it's definitely been designed with the fact that it's next to the Belle Isle Marsh and the fact that there is flooding in these areas. It's been designed with it in mind.
Thank you. Another question that we got was, how will the residents be sheltered from the noise from the MBTA car barn in the rear of the property?
That's a great question. Sharon, do you want to talk about this, or you want me to take
Talk
it?
about it a little bit. I actually worked on a project a number of years ago that was next to an MBTA bus yard, and it was extremely noisy. And we took a whole bunch of sound prevention measures. So, for example, extra high levels of insulation in the building envelope, which helps with some of the vibrations, doing thorough air sealing, because a tiny little gap in the wall will actually let a lot of noise through. And then using triple pane glazed windows. So we may not use the triple pane on the whole project, which would be nice to do because, there is airplane noise and they're good for thermal as well, but certainly windows facing that yard, we would want to put extra sound protection there.
Yeah, so one of the things that we'll probably be required to do because of the site's proximity to the MBTA yard is do noise tests. And if they're above a certain decibel, then we will be, for design standard reasons, we'll be doing triple pane windows and things like that. It'll probably be much, much quieter than some of the other, homes back there who probably predate the MBTA.
We have another question from Joanne Mahoney in the chat asking, what, if any, cleanup of this site will be done prior?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we will do a full we call it pre-characterization of the soil. So right now we've only done limited subsurface investigations. We've put in groundwater monitoring wells, and we've also gotten some soil test results back. So we test for everything. We test for PCBs, we test for petroleum, we test for lead, any kinds of contamination that would be in the soil itself. And then as we are sort of unpaving and opening up space for landscaping, as we're digging down for footings and we have to do soil removal for that, or any site regrading, any soil that we disturb has to be pre-characterized and tested. And then we bring in clean new fill to replace it. So in addition to all of the nice landscaping and greening of the site, which will help tremendously with just keeping it a healthier place and a cleaner place, and the fact that we won't have any oil uses on site, it'll just be residential, which is just a cleaner use overall. We will actually probably be removing some contaminated soil and replacing it with cleaner soil, which is a good thing for a site that's bordering the marsh.
Okay, we had another, it's more of a comment than a question around affordable housing. Just stating affordable housing tenants or owners also need access to a supermarket.
And that's probably, my guess is that's probably related to cars. And so I hear you. I know we all need access to supermarkets regardless of your income. So I hear you. I don't think they were asking us to build a supermarket on the site. I don't think that's what the neighborhood wants.
No, no.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Thank you, no. They can go,
Trader
they can,
Joe's.
they can hop on the train and go over to Stop and Shop or Target in Revere at Suffolk Downs. It's very, very good. They have everything you need there.
They certainly do.
And if you're a walker, you can walk. It's not too far a walk.
I think there were a couple of questions in the chat, Tony. I don't know if
Yeah.
if you're going to read those or you want us to,
I was
Sorry.
just about to
Okay.
read one from another one from Joanne Mahoney asking, does any environmental agency have oversight?
Yes, so we will have to file, we'll have a licensed site professional. And again, all of this is, I'm giving you my real estate developer's understanding of this process. I'm not an environmental engineer, but we'll have a licensed site professional who will do filings with Mass DEP. And all of that will be a part of the, so we will have a entire plan that's put together that Mass DEP has to review and approve related to this project. We will also, I'm trying to think, I think we will have to go before some local committees as well, right, Jeff?
So
Because of our
yeah,
proximity to the
because of the
market?
water, yeah, there'll be the Conservation Commission we'll have to
Yeah.
go before as well, and file with them. And I think that would be it.
Yeah, that's typically it for
Yeah.
us.
Another
Oh, no, go ahead, Tanya. I mean, Tony, go ahead.
Thanks. John Bertulli asks, I'm sure you'll be taking steps to prevent rat invasion when you did up or disturb the location. When the T tore down the Heights station, there was an increase in their population.
Yeah, so we've actually, even before taking ownership of the site, we've put out and done rodent control on the site just for the minimal soil borings that we did. Yes, we will definitely have, for lack of better words, a rodent control plan, both for during construction, quite frankly, and after. I mean, we have exterminators who come to our sites regularly throughout the year. This is East Boston. So we do take our rodent friends very seriously and do not want them on our site or going into any of our neighbors' yards.
Rob Domenico asked, will potential homeowners be required to purchase flood insurance?
Well, that's a great question. So most likely, yes, because the building's in a flood zone. So like many of us lucky homeowners in East Boston, and it is a privilege, they'll probably have to have flood insurance. Yeah.
What?
Has that been factored into the affordability? I would think that that's a huge
But that's a
cost.
great,
That's like-
it's a great question. I'm
this the
like
right
making a
site for
note of
that?
it right now, because when we always factor in condo fees when we think about our affordable pricing. I've not done this, like a condo building that's going to have flood insurance in it. So we probably will have to factor that into our pricing. Yeah.
Do you,
Go ahead.
do you have an idea of how long the project will take and when all the soil evaluations and all that stuff is taking place before the actual construction? Will that access all be done from Barnes Ave / Sharshin, or will it be done through the easement from the existing entrance into the property?
Yeah, so for as long as possible, I think we'll use that easement for site access. That's what we've been using to date. It's worked for the soil borings and the testing. In terms of a timeline for the project, maybe Jeff can give a little bit of a permitting overview, and then I can give you the funding and construction overview.
Sure. So just in terms of permitting, again, this project, just because of its size, has to go through two processes. We have to go through a BPDA, Boston Planning Development Agency process, and that's been taking even on a fast track, 9, 10, 11 months just to get through the BPDA, to get filed, to draft all the documents. Then you have to go on to the Zoning Board of Appeals. So you're probably looking at a 15 to 16 month approval process. And then you actually start Sharon will generate the final construction architectural drawings. We have to get water and sewer plans, all of the legal documents with, for affordability, and all that has to be generated, cooperation agreements with the city. So it's 2 years before you actually get, or 18 or 19 months. And then obviously Tanya knows better than I all about the funding sources that the CDC has to go through with these kind of projects too. So it's a long, but just on permitting, you're probably talking 18, 19.
Yeah, so I think, and then when you add to the permitting, our timeline is a little different than a private developer's. Typically, private developers, once their permitting appeals are up, they're trying to get a shovel in the ground right away.
Right.
That would be a dream for affordable housing in Massachusetts. That's sort of when we start being able to apply for our funding. And so that is usually about an additional 18-month to 2-year period before we can get our state and local money. So, I would say 3 years is probably the soonest you would see any construction starting. And that's, quite honestly, that's part of why we come to the neighborhood as early as we can, because this is such a long process, right? We don't even own the site yet, and we're talking to you guys.
Do you think, and this is just, a pie in the sky question, do you think there's any chance that the project will not go through because of something that comes along somewhere along the line, whether it be easements, permits, flooding, whatever?
It's an interesting question. There's always a chance. If we, through our due diligence, if we find something out that would just make this project too expensive, unfeasible, we're in that sense, certainly it could not happen. I can tell you that, a large part of the feasibility is the environmental work. And so far we haven't been scared off by our very preliminary investigations on site. There's more work to be done there. But there hasn't been anything alarming to date.
Is there a certain number of units, both residential and rental, that you have to have in the project for it to be affordable? Or is there is there a number at which point you can't go below because it then does not become a feasible project?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. We are not a private developer, so we're not making additional money off of every unit we build. I'll be totally honest with you. I think that having it broken, the massing broken into 2 buildings so that we have the nice green open space in the middle, does mean that it's a little bit more challenging to fund and to fundraise for and to qualify for some of the affordable housing finance. So that's more of where we're up against, like financial constraints, is that if either one of those buildings shrinks much smaller on a construction pricing scale and on a subsidy scale, they will become potentially unfeasible, in which case maybe where we would have to go is one larger building instead of 2 smaller. So the 2 smaller buildings, we liked the design, we liked it from an open space perspective. And then, a 22 unit condo building is something that is financeable, much smaller on the rental building. And we start to get into a world that's a little bit harder on the rental scale to finance. But that being said, we are going to try to look at this and get the right balance of scale and parking and open space. And this is not about profit. this is really about just financial feasibility from overall construction costs. We are constrained by per unit caps. We can't build the most expensive building.
Right.
We won't attract funding for it. And then also just, other funding criteria. So thanks for asking.
We have a comment in the chat from Pamela Cardillo stating the Cardillos that lived at 127 Barnes Ave for 40 years are 100% against the project with access from Barnes Ave. I didn't see any additional questions or comments in the chat. I'm not sure if anyone has any additional feedback that they'd like to provide now. You can feel free to unmute or share a question in the chat if you have one. I've been taking notes throughout this entire meeting, so I'll provide this feedback to everyone presenting tonight, as well as folks in attendance via the neighborhood council email list, and we'll post it on Facebook. And the recording will go live on our YouTube too. By the looks of it, I don't see any additional questions or comments, and nobody's popped up, raised a hand or anything. All right, it looks like we are done for this evening. Thank you so much for presenting and giving
Thanks for having us.
such great responses to everyone's questions.
Thank you. It's my first East Orion Heights Neighborhood Council meeting, and it's been very informative. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Glad you enjoyed
Thank
it.
you.
Everyone have a great rest of your Thursday.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Have a good night.